It's my go.
God! Oh, is it bigger?
Yes.
On the inside.
Look, we need to concentrate.
There it is.
Yep, I know where you're going with this, but I need you to calm down.
On the outside?
Oh, you certainly grasped the essentials.
My entire understanding of physical space has been transformed. Three-dimensional Euclidean geometry has been torn up, thrown in the air, and snubbed to death. My grasp of the universal constants of physical reality has been changed. Forever. Sorry. I've always wanted to see that done properly.
Aren't you just the teeniest bit sorry we didn't get a Christmas tree? I mean, even though they're dirty and messy and corny and cliched.
Well, where are you going to find a tree at this hour on Christmas Eve?
Once again, it was Christmas Eve. Night was falling, and the lamplighters were plying their trade.
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
My apologies.
Put me out! Put me out! What? Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
You wouldn't want to hurt a fellow civil servant, would you? What's all this violence? It's Christmas, and I was just delivering some Christmas. Hey! Back up! This is a homemade explosive device, and I'll blow it up. You know why? Because I work for the post office, so you know I'm not stable. Now put the guns down. Now! Put them down. Brother man, put your gun down. Everybody! You too, Barnaby Jones. All right, just stay there. And I'll know if you move, because I have the ear of a snake. Ciao, baby.
Oh, you shouldn't mess with that.
Relax, Sparky. I was on the bomb squad for 10 years.
Got me for that bomb? Just a sick world we're living in. Sick people.
How many years in the bomb squad?
Reserve your opinions, gentlemen. Hear me out. Across the river, 10 miles downstream, is the village of Trenton. It is held by 1,200 Hessians with Rahl in command. They have food, warm clothing, blankets, tents, cannons, muskets, ammunition, in short, everything we need. In 4 days, it will be Christmas. There will be a great deal of feasting and a great deal of drinking by the Hessians that day and night. I propose that on the eve of December 25th, we cross the river, march on Trenton, and attack the Hessians before dawn. And if God is with us, we'll take the whole lot of them.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Uncut History. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm gonna compliment myself. I'm gonna be that brazen. That was a pretty smooth start. I was able to transition right. We were right on time at 7:30. We started with the funny reel, and then just I had the intro, the actual intro in the brand for StreamYards, and then I was able to just smoothly phase in and smoothly phase out. I'm proud of myself. Actually, we can end the stream right now. I did it. A smooth intro. Good night, everybody. No, we have a whole stream ahead of us. I promise. How is everybody doing tonight? Let me know in the chat. And if you're going to lurk, if you're not going to make your presence known in the chat, you want to hide in the bushes, the very least you could do is hit the like button down below. Because when you hit the like button, for reasons known only to artificial intelligence, it increases the viewership for this channel. It brings more eyes, more attention to historical edumerication. Yeah, I know what I said. So if you hit that like button, you're going to help us grow, and you're going to help make historical content larger and more prominent on social media outlets, and not brain rot like 15 million AI generated. I could go on a rant about there's a whole like content farming community out there. Well, that'll just insert poorly generated images that are roughly related to a historical event, and then basically take a Wikipedia article and just cram it through ChatGPT. I don't even know if it's going through ChatGPT, because I think ChatGPT could give you a much more accurate depiction of a historical event than what's coming out on these videos. And they get all the views. And they rot the brains of current and future generations. Yes. I'm very depressed now. Tonight, we are talking about the Battle of Nashville. We're picking up where we left off Thanksgiving night when we talked about the Battle of Franklin. So we're still in Tennessee in 1864, December of 1864. The fourth year of the American Civil War is coming to a conclusion. And if you recall, when we left off, where's my face? No. Okay, can we have both of us? Okay, that works. That works. If you remember where we left off with our video about the Battle of Franklin, things were not going good for John Bell Hood and the Confederate Army of Tennessee. As a brief recap, what's been going on in 1864 with the Confederate Army of Tennessee? Well, they got kicked out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. The Union pursued the Confederates across northern Georgia, a series of battles such as the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. Ultimately, Joe Johnston, who was in charge of the Army the first half of the year, he is going to be replaced by John Bell Hood, the youngest Army commander for either side during the American Civil War at 33 years of age. And John Bell Hood is going to be very aggressive. He's going to put some new vinegar. Yes, he liked vinegar chips. Yes, that was actually the rations they gave out in Atlanta. Yes. He's going to put some new vigor in the Army of Tennessee, who are now besieged by William Tecumseh Sherman around Atlanta in the summer of 1864. He's going to launch some aggressive attacks on different portions of Sherman's army. Is not able to break out of Atlanta, and by early September, Hood decides to get out while he can with his army. They abandon their trench lines around Atlanta before Sherman can completely cut them off. The Union captured Atlanta, but not the Army of Tennessee. It lives to fight another day. And while you may expect that Hood would continue to try to stop Sherman getting deeper into Georgia, he's going to do something very different. He's going to allow Sherman to go march through Georgia, and we all know what happens with that. Hood is setting his sights on Nashville, Tennessee. He's going back north because there's a couple of reasons why he's doing this. For one, he wants to keep the army moving, which keeps the soldiers' minds off of the very real implosion of the Confederate States of America that's happening at this point. Keep their minds off of that. Give them a target. Make it seem like they're gaining ground such in a late stage of this war that's not going well for the Confederacy. And also because Nashville has a lot of symbolic value for the Confederacy. It was the first state capital that fell to the Union back in 1862, and they want to liberate it again, at least in their perception. So Hood sets his sights on Nashville, Tennessee in late 1864. Now, when he started, there was some method to his madness because Nashville, though it had very intricate defenses around the city, fortifications, which we'll talk about later on in tonight's stream. There weren't a lot of men in Nashville, at least in the mid 1864, because Union forces were in they're in Georgia, or they're over fighting Robert E. Lee in Virginia, or they're trying to control the Mississippi River Valley. All you had were some garrison men really in Nashville. So what's going to end up happening is Hood sees, hey, if I can move quick enough, I can have a very realistic numerical advantage if I move quick enough. However, he was not able to move quick enough. Men such as John Schofield with his small Union force are going to be able to delay Hood buy enough time for George Thomas, Union Major General in Nashville, to start pulling from left, right, and center any and all reinforcements he can get to fill those earthworks and those defenses around Nashville. And by the time we get to early December of 1864, yeah, it ain't looking good. The Confederate Army of Tennessee, they had just suffered 20% casualties at the Battle of Franklin. Union forces had withdrawn from their Franklin defenses, but that was always the plan. They fall back into the Nashville defenses and other smaller outposts. And, well, Sherman is in Savannah, Georgia. He has made it to the Atlantic Ocean and is now starting to debate what his next plans are going to be to completely destroy the Confederacy's infrastructure. Now, we mentioned that Thomas is pulling from left, right, and center. And by the way, if you're keeping track, George H. Thomas, his nickname at this time is the Rock of Chickamauga. He became very well known in the chain of command in Union Army because back in 1863, when William Rosecrans was in charge of the Union Army of the Cumberland and seemed to have the Confederate Army of Tennessee's number, he fumbled the ball at an event known as the Battle of Chickamauga, second bloodiest battle of the American Civil War, second only behind Gettysburg. This brutal, they usually say 2-day battle, but really it was a 3-day fight. Go watch History Savior 1941's Project Pass. Go watch their coverage on the Battle of Chickamauga. You'll really get a appreciation for how big that engagement was. Anyways, Thomas was able to form a last-ditch defense rear guard to protect the rear guard as the Union retreated off the battlefield and spared the Army of the Cumberland from being completely obliterated in this one major win the Confederate Army of Tennessee gets during the war. So that's how he became the Rock of Chickamauga. He ended up getting in charge of the Army of Cumberland after Rosecrans was relieved. However, Thomas has not had the best of relations with men like Ulysses S. Grant, who, of course, at this point, he's commander of all Union forces in 1864. Grant, however, he's made his headquarters in the Eastern Theater. He is with the Union Army of the Potomac, laying siege to the Confederate Army in North Virginia around Petersburg, Virginia at this time. They don't necessarily see eye to eye. Grant does have some respect for him. Sherman has very little respect for Thomas at this point. Sherman sees Thomas as a slow, meandering general that takes forever to get his forces together. And this will actually play a little bit into the buildup. This animosity between Sherman and Thomas will lead to a bit of the buildup of this battle. So Thomas, he's trying to pull from left, right, and center, as I mentioned earlier, as Hood gets back into Tennessee. Schofield is trying to delay him. Schofield has elements of the 4th and the 23rd Corps. That'll be the force that actually fights Hood at the Battle of Franklin. Again, we had a whole stream about that a couple weeks ago. I highly recommend you check that out. But he's also going to get reinforcements, probably a little bit grudgingly, from Sherman. Detachment of the Army of Tennessee. Yes, Army of the Tennessee. Oh, I need to put a "the" there. Yeah, about that. So, you see, you have the Army of Tennessee, the Confederate Army of Tennessee, which is John Bell Hood's force, coming to try to capture Nashville. Then you have the Union Army of the Tennessee. Oh, yes, it gets confusing. And I got confused making the slideshow. So imagine a "the" before the Tennessee. Yes. So Andrew Jackson Smith, he's one of the older corps commanders in the Union Army at this point in the war, and also should mention is a Pennsylvanian, if I'm not mistaken. Andrew Jackson Smith is going to be sent with a corps from the Army of the Tennessee to reinforce Thomas up in Nashville. You're also going to have this. I've heard different descriptions of this force. Some say it's a corps, but I don't think he had the number advantage to be a corps. So we have James Steedman. Is it Steedman or Stedman? I've always followed Stedman. Apparently he ranted about anybody who spelled it with an A, but it also implies it must have had been pronounced as Stedman. Steedman? We're going to say Stedman. I'm going to get in trouble. The chat will hate me. They say I don't know anything about history. Fair enough. Stedman's Provincial Division. And this is really just a bunch of regiments that are all in central Tennessee or up in Kentucky or even in Ohio. And Thomas getting on the line and going, I need you now. Yeah, get down here. Stedman's your commander. It's not going to be a fun time for you, but it's going to be an important time for this country. Get your butts down here now. And included in that will be elements of 8 different United States Colored Troop regiments, which will play a key part in the coming battle. Now, another thing that I should mention about Nashville. Nashville before the war had a population of about 30,000 people. By 1864, at least according to the little bit I've been reading here I gotta love this title, in The Cheese Board of War, Sherman and Hood in the autumn campaigns of 1864. I couldn't really get into deep reading about the battle just because I'm jockeying, college, work, making a video about Valley Forge. There's a lot going on here at Redoubt Productions. I need more sleep. I need sleep. I'm looking forward to the holiday. But I did have time to sit down and read this. This is actually a book about Sherman and Hood in 1864, their respective campaigns, because they're going opposite directions. I particularly, of course, read the chapters about Nashville. And it says that by 1864, Nashville's population was approaching 100,000 people, which is pretty impressive. Wars usually cause people to abandon cities. Nashville is the opposite. Nashville blossomed because of the war. It's a railroad juncture. You have the Cumberland River going through there, so you have the river traffic going through Nashville. And then when the war comes, Nashville is a massive depot for the Union Army once they capture it in 1862. Is a massive depot to gather all of these supply caches and then divvy them out across Tennessee, divvy them out over to the Mississippi River Valley where Union forces are fighting, divvy them over where Union forces are trying to defend Kentucky. It's a very important location for the Union war effort, which is partly why Hood's targeted this at this critical hour in the American Civil War. He wants to try to cripple some element of the Union war effort, delay it, try to, second guess the Union population that this war is nearing a conclusion. You can also, if you really go down the rabbit hole about reading about, as I try to get this, there we go. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole, Nashville's economy during the war, all these soldiers, they couldn't wait to go to Nashville because Nashville was it's a little bit of a red light district. Nashville was one of the first cities in the United States of America to attempt to legalize prostitution. I forget if it was the first, but it was one of the earliest ones to do that. So, yeah, Union soldiers really liked being stationed in Nashville because you had all sorts of food coming in and out due to the railroads. You had some, feminine support in the evenings. It was, soldiers liked being in Nashville. Officers, not so much. So it's a very important place for the Union war efforts, which I'm trying to say. And now it's coming under threat by this Confederate force. And what is going to happen is, I want to see, do I have a slot? What's going to end up happening is Hood is going to get the Confederate Army of Tennessee just south on the southern outskirts of Nashville around December 2nd, 1864. Just around this time that Thomas is starting to put all of the pieces of his ad hoc army together. I mean, he's in charge of the Army of the Cumberland, but there's many different armies represented. And in some ways, this reminds me a lot of the Battle of Chattanooga that we talked about last year and had happened last year to Thomas as well. In 1863, the Confederate Army of Tennessee had pushed the Union back, push them into defenses on a city along the river. The Confederates take high ground south of a city, and then there's a wait. There's a lull. Everybody's expecting a great battle, but due to the elements and due to logistic issues, there is a delay in any battle actually happening. So this is very similar to Chattanooga, which means Thomas is no stranger to the position Hood has put him in. Again, it's not the one I want. And so Hood's going to start entrenching on December 2nd. Now, Hood is going to try to he has about, I've seen numbers, a lot of the websites like the American Battlefield Trust are reporting that Hood has 30,000 soldiers in his army at this point. I don't know if he has that much. I think he may have. I personally have a gut feeling he only had 20,000, but again, I would have to do more research on that. His army's pretty darn battered by this point, and trying to stretch them out on 4 lines of earthworks is very difficult for him to do. Not just because it's very cold, it's getting cold, it's December, so the ground is harder to dig up and build into fortifications, but also because, his men are he just doesn't have the numbers that he started out with. The reality is starting to set in the back of Hood's head, the damaging effects his attack at Franklin had. But he's trying to save face. He doesn't want the army to panic. He's still trying to call Franklin, hey, we pushed, the Union retreated. That means they gave us the field. That means we won, guys, right? Yes. And look, Nashville, I told you, we're going to get to Nashville. It's right there. We can see the state capitol. But as they sit in these cold earthworks and they're barely able to fill up the earthworks, soldiers, particularly those that are not from Tennessee, like your Georgian soldiers, are going to start having doubts about their commander's abilities, and they're going to start wanting to go back home. They would rather be at home. Why are they in Tennessee? If you're Georgian, if you're from Georgia, your home is being, well, according to the papers, is being burned left, right, and center by Sherman. I could go on a whole rant about the misunderstanding of Sherman's March to the Sea popular media has. Everybody thinks Sherman is going to the northern border, to the southern border, to the western border, and to the Atlantic Ocean. That is not an efficient campaign, guys. Sherman was very particular. This was going to be a fast campaign to bring the war to a sudden conclusion, and that was going to be one swift line right through the heart of Georgia, no real deviations. That's a stream for another day. But you're hearing these rumors. These soldiers are starting to hear rumors of destruction in Georgia. And if you're not from Tennessee and you don't have a personal stake in the preservation of Tennessee as a Confederate state, and here you are sitting in the cold, you're thinking of all those losses you suffered a few weeks earlier at Franklin. Yeah, it's going to start getting to you. It's going to start getting to your psychology. And hey, we have Captain Garrett of the Swords and Starships stream podcast channel thingy. Doohickey. Join us tonight. How are you doing? And I should also mention Hood's 4 miles of earthworks. That's not even able to cover half of Thomas's lines of very well-built defenses with earthworks in between. There were proper forts built around Nashville. One of them was Fort Negley, which is really one of the only surviving elements of the battlefield we're about to talk about that's preserved in Nashville today. It wasn't just an earthen redoubt. It was a proper stone fort with redans, with bastions. It was a crazy design, especially for, we don't think of those during the American Civil War. So Thomas got some pretty comfortable defenses to sit inside. Hood decides he's going to send portions of his army, particularly most of his cavalry, commanded by Nathan Bedford Forrest. He's going to send them to the southeast to try to take out a Union garrison that's been kind of cut off from Thomas since Hood's moved north, and Hood's now blocking Nashville and Murfreesboro. So he sends Forrest over to Murfreesboro to see if he can try to capture, destroy, push the garrison, do something to the Union soldiers there. But there's also the hope that if Murfreesboro is under threat, Thomas may send some soldiers out of Nashville to try to go and alleviate that pressure. And maybe that'll offer an opening. Thomas is weakening his forces to go to try to relieve Murfreesboro. Maybe now, just maybe it will still be an uphill battle. we'll still have numerically inferior numbers, but maybe now we can get into Nashville. Again, you could really see the desperations is starting to set in December of 1864 in the saggy flesh. The saggy flesh. Oh, okay. So Hood sends that detachment of force over to Murfreesboro. Thomas doesn't take the bait. Around this time, we have Union gunboats. We got the Brownwater Navy of the Union is operating here. This is part of the Battle of Nashville. I actually didn't hear about until I started prepping for the stream. That yes, I think it's around December 7th. You're actually going to have Union gunboats going up the Cumberland River and trying to get in range of some of Hood's fortifications and trying to lay some fire on them. And then over the night of December 8th and 9th, an ice storm rolls in over Nashville. And this is just appalling for both armies, even for Thomas and the Union forces. The temperatures, they're going to plunge below freezing. I've heard they've gone below zero during this ice storm. The Confederates, they're low on supplies at this point. Their clothing is in tatters. Their canvases are in tatters. They're now basically exposed to the elements. It is awful. Communication between Washington, D.C. and Nashville is being disrupted. The telegraph lines are going down from the storm. So Grant, President Lincoln, they don't really have a good idea what's happening. And it's around this time that Grant is getting bite-sized. He's just getting fragments of information of what's happened in Tennessee. I mean, we know what's happening. We know the story of Franklin. We know of how bad the situation Hood is in. He's in a do-or-die situation, which Thomas is chomping at the bit to take advantage of. Grant is hearing bits and pieces of there's a Confederate force in Tennessee. Thomas has not left Nashville. He has sat there the whole time that this Confederate force has moved, and now this Confederate force is entrenched around Nashville. It's not looking good. And you have Sherman, Grant's number one general, always in his ear. Sherman saying all these things about Thomas. There's been a lot of negative things said about Thomas over the course of the war. Many people doubted his loyalty. He's from Virginia, by the way. Many people doubted Thomas's loyalty to the Union. He stuck with the Union. His family basically disowned him. There's a popular story of his sisters, apparently, when he decides to remain with the Union and not side with Virginia in the American Civil War, they overturn his portrait in the family parlor. So there was a lot of doubts that he would be loyal to the Union. I think we could all safely say through our discussions about Thomas over the past year, he's proven his worth. But now he hasn't moved. Sherman has constantly said that Thomas is too slow in command. He moves like molasses. Look what he's done. He's basically allowed the Confederacy to regain the initiative in Tennessee, which did not look possible in the summer of 1864 when Sherman left Hood. So it gets to a point. There's talks about sending John Logan over, I think he's in charge of the 15th Corps for the Union Army, to send him over and take charge of the Union defenses around Nashville. And then there's a point, depending on the story you hear, sometimes you think, is this being too hyped up to mythologize? There's apparently a story around December 14th or 15th. Grant himself is going to leave the siege lines around Petersburg to go personally command the Union Army in Nashville. I mean, that's how desperate Grant thinks the situation is becoming around Nashville. But before he's able to board a train to relieve Thomas at command, this ice storm will finally break through. And we are finally here at the Battle of Nashville. Once those temperatures just get up into the 30s, at least, Thomas is ready to go. And then I was going to try to do a bit here where I was going to try to be like a ring announcer, and then I couldn't think of anything. So, fighting out of the red corner from Kentucky, now making his home in Texas at the age of 33. He has taken charge of the Army of Tennessee and has led them several hundred miles up through the north, through Tennessee. However, he has really yet to gain a major battlefield victory in command. He is seeking his first major victory, and if he can achieve that victory, it may be a turning point of the conflict for his side's favor, with 30,000 soldiers reportedly under his command. This is John Bell Hood. One-legged, one-armed John Bell Hood. And fighting now with the blue corner from Virginia, but staying loyal to the Union at the age of 48, with many years of experience fighting both in the Mexican-American War and throughout the American Civil War. He has seen the battles at Mill Spring, the battles at Shiloh. He has seen the Union run, but he has stood his ground like a stone wall, like a certain other Virginian. He was able to break through the Confederate lines on Missionary Ridge around Chattanooga, and since then he has been in charge of Union defenses around Nashville. He is the Rock of Chickamauga with over 55,000 soldiers under his command. This is George H. Thomas. And Fu Man Blue has joined us in. Welcome. Are you ready? Are you ready? Sherman is. Oh yes, you have mentioned. I need to read. I need to read the Savior Generals, and I could do a stream about it if I read the Savior Generals. I could do a stream about it. Here we go. The first day of fighting. Once that ice storm lets up a little bit, when people are. They're still freezing to death. Don't get me wrong, folks. They're still freezing to death, but they're able to survive the cold. The Union Army is going to emerge from the defenses around Nashville and begin to attack Hood's line. Now, keep in mind, Hood has the high ground. And, as we all apparently, everybody believes just having the high ground automatically means you win. More often than not, have I done a video about a battle and having the high ground, it don't end well for the defenders. It didn't end well at Chattanooga. We all know that. And I said there's a lot of similarities to the battles for Chattanooga with the Battle of Nashville. But here we go. Thomas's strategy. His original plan at daybreak on December 15th, he wants Stedman to come out of his defenses, move to the east of Nashville, and try to strike the extreme Confederate right flank, which is being held by elements of Cheatham's Corps. However, there will be some shenanigans and trying to get this force moving. They don't get rolling. I don't think it's till like 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. So this fight is a little delayed. Once they get up to the right flank, they're going to find that it is pretty darn well guarded. This is one of the better parts of. There's people in the hallway talking. They're oblivious to the fact I am trying to give a very, very important lecture on the Battle of Nashville, this forgotten battle. Yes, I feel so respected here on Readout Productions by everybody else in the household. Anyways, so Stedman's division, provincial division, they come up, they're following one of the pikes out east of Nashville, and they're also following along the Nashville and Chattanooga railroad bed. So they're coming up this railroad bed, and they find at the top of this railroad cut, you got what's known as Granbury's Lunette. It is a Confederate earthwork towering over these soldiers who are to make their way for the railroad cut or trying to make their way at the front. It's not very fun to attack. Most of Stedman's attack is stalled on December 15th. And a lot of these guys, again, these are United States colored troops that are making these attacks. A lot of these guys, this is the first time they've ever been in battle before. Their service for the past year in the Union Army has really just been used for manual labor. But desperate times call for desperate measures. So to heck with all the racism that's, rampant for both armies. Thomas like, put them in. I need anybody and everybody for this battle. So a lot of these USCT forces are getting their first taste of action, and they will suffer some pretty high losses around Granbury's Lunette. This is all a distraction, trying to distract Hood, trying to convince Hood to move soldiers to the right flank. Because as you can see in that map, Thomas's real plan commences around 1 p.m. or around afternoon on December 15th. And that's when they're going to have elements of 4 Union Corps. Oh, yeah, you heard me say it. Elements of 4 Union Army Corps making their way out of the trenches, swinging from the west to the south, and then facing to the east. They're swinging like a door, just like the 20th Maine at Gettysburg. They're swinging like a door, but on a massive scale. You're going to have 3 Infantry Corps. Of course, you're going to have Schofield's 23rd Union Army Corps. You're going to have Wood's 4th Union Army Corps. You got Andrew J. Smith's Army Corps from the Army of the Tennessee. And then on the right flank of the Union attack, you're actually going to have parts of Wilson's Cavalry Corps screening their movements. And one of the big things Thomas was focusing on, no, it wasn't the captain. No, the captain was not here. No, the captain was not intruding. There were other forces that were intruding on the stream earlier. I don't think you heard him on the mic, but I could hear them in my ears. Maybe it was the cat. I mean, what's the cat situation? None of them. That's scary. None of them are here, which means I don't know where they're at, which means at any moment they could attack me and the stream could automatically end. Not good. Not good, ladies and gentlemen. So, part of Thomas's focus as he was waiting to make the attack, when he's stuck there in this ice storm, he's trying to get all of his force together, was actually trying to refit Wilson's cavalry, because throughout the whole summer of campaign, I mean, they had lost several horses, they were low on supplies, they were getting new recruits in because veterans were dying off, or, their enlistments were expiring. And, December is the start of winter. This is supposed to be the start of winter quarters in this time for warfare. There are exceptions to that in the American Civil War. Stones River and Fredericksburg are perfect examples. But the tradition of, in the winter we stop fighting because it's just everything's impassable due to the snow and due to the freezing temperatures, that's still present in the minds of men like Hood and Thomas. So Thomas was trying to take advantage of this time of trying to get Wilson's corps outfitted in a hurry, re-outfitted in a hurry. I mean, they're basically going to civilians and commandeering everybody's horses in Nashville in preparation for this battle. I've heard they apparently took the carriage horses for Andrew Johnson, who had just at this time got elected vice president of the United States. I remember the election of 1864 happened just past November. Before that, he was the military governor of Tennessee, so he was living in Nashville. So they confiscate future President Johnson's horses to help outfit Wilson's Union cavalry for this big attack. And it all pays off. This big attack, swinging like a door, crashes right into the Confederate defenses along the Hillsborough Pike. And you'll notice on the map, there's 5 redoubts on the left flank of the Confederate army. The plan was, these would anchor this entrenchment that Hood had devised. In reality, redoubts 4 and 5 were completely disconnected from the main Confederate battle line. They were far too out of rank. They were way out there down the line. He didn't have the troops to the garrison that entire length of the line. He had soldiers in the redoubts, but between them, there was next to nothing other than some skirmishers. So Wilson's cavalry just rolls right over redoubts 4 and 5 and get into the rear of the Confederate left flank. The free infantry corps, they make their way redoubts 1, 2, and 3, smash right into them. There is going to be fierce fighting along there, but ultimately the numbers game overwhelms the Confederate defenders, and all the redoubts are soon taken by Union forces. Hood realizes what's going on, that he's about to be outflanked on the left, so he orders a general withdrawal from his initial battle line, and he's going to pull back a few hundred, I think it's a few hundred yards up to a mile. He's going to pull back and try to make a new defensive line, and that is the first day of the Battle of Nashville. Union victory. A feint on the Confederate right, which allows Thomas to make his massive assault on the Confederate left, breaks through their lines with somewhat ease. I mean, there are casualties. Actually, I think it's on this day the highest ranking casualty for the Union, which is a colonel, has suffered during this attack. But they're able to get across the Hillsborough Pike and force Hood a little bit farther away from his goal of taking Nashville. Yes, they are plot. Yeah, there's one right there. You can't see them, but they're right there. They're right there at the floor. They are plotting. Have you heard Razorfit's argument that Abraham Lincoln was an evil tyrant, and do you agree? I've had a few requests to do my interpretation, do my, I guess, rebuff to Razorfit's video. It's been a while since I've watched the video, to be honest. What I remember is there's things I agree with, but then there's a lot of things I don't agree with Razorfist. There's things, it's a mixture. I know that in the, I guess you want to call it the YouTube history community, most people have completely have disagreed with Razorfit's interpretation. I'm a little bit more on the fence. I don't, there's I'll do it one day. I just got to rewatch that video before I make if I could even remember what my hiccups were with it. In any case, this is there's not a lot of illustrations really to visualize the Battle of Nashville, so I kind of had to pick and choose. I had to find a way to how do I stretch this out. This gives you a pretty good idea of what the fight in around the Granbury Lunette may have looked like. You'll notice in the background, those are actually USCT troops that are on top of the Confederate breastworks. We also have here, this is showing you some of the main attack that's happening on the Confederate left flank, happen along the redoubts as the Union forces overwhelm them. And that brings us to December 16th. So Hood, he's very battered at this point, but he's not giving up. He refuses to give up. He can't give up. If he gives up attacking Nashville, this is it for the Army of Tennessee. There's no going back. He could have withdrawn after Franklin, but then he would have had the lingering question, well, what if we would have kept going to Nashville? What if after the Union withdrew, we followed them? He couldn't live with that. He had to try. He had to gamble it all because it's a do or die for the moment for the Confederacy at this point. So, morning December 16th, Hood has made a new battle line. In my opinion, a much better defense than he had on the first day. Instead of being stretched thin over 4 miles, he has concentrated his forces to a 2-mile battle line, which he has done a pretty good job of trying to anchor his flanks. Each of his flanks are anchored by a hilltop. Cheatham's corps, which are occupying the left flank, they're occupying what's known as Compton's Hill. And on the right flank, which is Lee's corps, they're essentially occupying what's called, I think it was Peachtree Hill. These both get renamed after the battle, so it could get a little confusing. So they're on high ground, the flanks are. You can see Cheatham's corps is even kind of wrapping around Compton's Hill, just trying to use all the topography to their advantage and try to prevent another outflanking by the cavalry. Thomas is sticking to his plan from the first day. He is going to make a feint attack on the Confederate right before making a massive left hook that'll hopefully break through the battle lines. And he's hoping Wilson will be able to get behind with his Union cavalry early enough in the day that when the breakthrough happens, the Confederates have nowhere to run. And this isn't just going to be a Union victory. Thomas is hoping he is going to bag the Army of Tennessee and take them all prisoner and essentially end the Western theater of the American Civil War. Hey, everything's on the line here. It's crazy how people really don't talk about this battle too much. I mean, Franklin only recently is getting more famous I guess, more well-known in the public zeitgeist of the American Civil War. And that's thanks in large part to efforts by the Battle of Franklin Trust, reclaiming parts of that battlefield and restoring them to their 1864 appearance. As for Nashville, nobody talks about really what happened after Franklin. Everybody sees it as a done deal, even me included. I've been called on the Franklin stream that Franklin is the decisive action of this Nashville campaign, what you want to call Hood's effort to try to reclaim Tennessee for the Confederacy. In my opinion, the decisive event was Franklin, because Franklin was so devastating that what was going to happen in Nashville was inevitable. But that's us in the 21st century seeing all the chips on the table. Hood, nor Thomas for that matter, see all the chips on the table. They're living in the moment. This is do or die for them. Oh boy. I have an interesting thing from Rumble. I'm not going to read it. You just have people just have to ruin things and just say really stupid shit. Owen Ringler has joined in for us with a 420. So, yeah, left, right, yeah, where are we at? Yeah, right feint, left strike. However, on December 16th, the Union attack on the right begins. They're coming down once again. They're falling down the railroad grades here. They're going to start pressing on the Franklin Pike. They're starting to press Lee's corps. And once again, very well entrenched. Better than yesterday, even. Lee's corps is around Peachtree Hill. Stedman's provincial division they're getting mauled. It's around this time, one of the regiments I wanted to talk about, actually, you're going to get involved in the battle, the 13th United States Colored Troops. They were formed the previous year in the war. A lot of these guys were actually recruited out of Williamson County, which is actually the county that Franklin is in. Franklin, Tennessee is in. A lot of these folks are actually former slaves. Some of them emancipated, which essentially meant when the Union Army came through, they ran to them. It's like, I will do anything for you to get out of bondage. Other ones would later be recruited into the Army when they get word that, this is happening, we're forming these regiments. So that's an interesting, because I always end up talking about, when we end up talking about African-American soldiers in the Union Army during the American Civil War, never fails. Everybody talks about the 54th Massachusetts. I love the movie Glory to Bits, but it's not a good depiction of the demographic of the 54th Massachusetts. It wasn't a bunch of runaway slaves. The 54th Massachusetts was mostly free men from northern states. There is evidence of some from southern states, but most were northern states. Most had lived their whole lives as free individuals. Some of them were pretty well off. Had some of them even had white collar jobs. Honestly, Andre Brocker's character, Thomas's character, he's a pretty good depiction of the typical 54th Massachusetts soldier. But the movie, of course, makes it out to me that was a lot more of ex-slaves. That wasn't the 54th Massachusetts. So it gives the people a misinterpretation, I guess, of that particular regiment. Now, this USCT regiment, you have a lot of former slaves in this regiment. So these are folks that are fighting their way literally fighting for their freedom in this conflict. The 13th USCT, they're recruited in the previous year of the conflict. They're mainly used for manual labor, used to fix the rail lines for Tennessee and down for Georgia as Sherman's armies advance on Atlanta. And they're only going to see their first real taste of action in November of 1864 and a little skirmish around Johnsonsville, Tennessee. They're going to be part of this provincial division that is attacking Peachtree Hill here on December 16th. This is their first major battle. They're going in with about 550 soldiers. They are walking over the bodies of the first brigade that was sent to the attack. It was completely rebucked by the defenses up there. Now they're going to come through those broken lines. They're going to push their way on top of the ramparts. They're not really able to make a decisive breakthrough. I've heard accounts vary over. Did the 13th USCT get through? Did they actually penetrate the Confederate line today? Some say no, they were driven back. Their baptism by fire, they suffer 40% casualties in their only major battle in the American Civil War, being December 15th and 16th, 1864. Most of their losses are here, trying to break through the Confederate lines on Peachtree Hill. I was reading about there was 5 brothers, the Armstrong brothers. They all enlist in the Army. They're from the Franklin area. One of their brothers is going to be mortally wounded. He'll die 2 days later in a hospital back in Nashville. I also read about Private Miles German. Miles German, he had a wife and 4 children who were in bondage at this time during the war. He was able to join the Union Army. I was able to run away and was able to join the Union Army in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's now literally fighting his way back up north. He will be mortally wounded. He will suffer in the Nashville hospital until late January of 1865 from wounds received here fighting around Peachtree Hill. Oh, we're jumping ahead of the story. So, you have Stedman's provincial division. They're doing the feint again, and again, it's working. Hood, he starts pulling forces from Shies Hill, which is, well, I'm going to explain in a moment why it's called Shies Hill. Compton's Hill, my apologies. I told you, the hills, they all get renamed at the battle just to confuse us historians. Great. History. Reciting history is fun. But Hood, he sees his attack again. He starts pulling forces from Cheatham's Corps, from Stewart's Corps, trying to send him to plug the gaps on the Confederate right flank. Of course, this is where Schofield is supposed to make, with his 23rd Corps, they're supposed to make a massive attack on Compton's Hill. Schofield, for reasons that are still controversial, he keeps telling Thomas that Thomas is underestimated the numbers on Compton's Hill. And Schofield refuses to attack. He keeps requesting reinforcements. Thomas grants that. He sends forces over from Smith's Corps. Schofield still refuses. And now we're getting to midday, mid-afternoon. By this point, Wilson has made the flanking maneuver into the rear. We're ready for the kill. Come on, Schofield. And Schofield's like, no. I'm sure there's an explanation for this, but I haven't found one yet, except that he keeps saying, he keeps telling Thomas, you're wrong. You don't realize how many Confederates are up there on Compton Hill. And eventually at one point, some of Smith's Corps, some of his brigades, they just start going without approval from Schofield. And there's also talks that Thomas had told Smith, in 5 minutes, if Schofield doesn't move, you just start moving. So eventually Schofield is forced to follow with elements of Smith's Corps to start the major attack up Compton's Hill. And indeed, it is a struggle to get up there. It's a steep slope. There's a cornfield at the base of it, so it's a killing field. A lot of these guys are going through. You have men like the 20th Tennessee, commanded by Colonel Shy. See why Compton's Hill gets called Shy's Hill. They're up there basically on the top of the hill. They're not even in the military crest. They're on the very top, right next to the artillery pieces, pouring fire down upon all these forces making through. That's going to include 4 Minnesota regiments that are amongst MacArthur's division that are making their way up the slopes of Compton's Hill. They suffer some of the heaviest losses the Union Army will have during the Battle of Nashville. Their attack is immortalized in a painting by Howard Pyle, which just was commissioned for the Minnesota State Capitol building in 1907. It shows the 5th and 9th Minnesota going through the cornfields, sweeping up Compton's Hill. It will be the 10th Minnesota Regiment that's actually credited with getting to the crest and breaking through a thin line of Floridians that were guarding the top of Compton's Hill. So although there was much delay and people were overestimating the Confederate forces, eventually Minnesotans and then eventually Ohioans, men from Illinois, and Schofield and Smith's elements of Schofield and Smith's Army Corps punch through Compton's Hill. The Confederate line has now finally been broke on December 16th, 1864, and it is complete chaos. From there on, Confederate forces begin pulling off of Compton's Hill. Stuart's men start pulling back. Lee's Corps, everybody just starts pulling back. It's a unraveling. The only thing that's really sparing Hood's army at this point is since Schofield delayed throughout much of the day, was hesitant to make this attack, knowing how bloody it may be. By the time the breakthrough occurs and by the time the chaos is everything's breaking down and the Confederate Army of Tennessee, darkness is settling over the battlefield, and it's very difficult for Thomas' men to operate. So though Wilson was in position to make the sweep, he's not able to bag the whole army for Thomas. But nevertheless, Battle Nashville, Union victory. Hood, under the cover of darkness, organizes as best he can a withdrawal off the battlefield. 1,500 Confederate soldiers are going to be captured by the end of this. They'll make up the casualties. It's chaos. It is chaos. During the chaos, there's an interesting story I stumbled across. The captain is no good at being quiet, YouTuber. Comes with the territory. Yes. There's a story in the aftermath of the breakthrough on Compton's Hill, which will get renamed Shy's Hill because Colonel Shy of the 20th Tennessee that was up there was killed. After the breakthrough occurs, and of course, these Union soldiers, they're starting to take in a bunch of Confederate prisoners. You're going to have Brigadier General Thomas Benton Smith of the Confederate Army. He is taken prisoner, and as he's starting to be led down the Granny White Pike back toward Nashville as a prisoner of war, he's left the battlefield at this point. He's in Union custody. A Union officer, who some describe as drunk, rides up and begins to bludgeon Smith over the head with a saber and just goes repeatedly, cursing in the air. To the point that eventually, I guess, some Union soldiers had to tackle him to get him off because you're attacking an unarmed man at this point. He's a prisoner of war. The story goes that this assailant of Smith is identified as being Colonel William L. McMillan, and I have read a little bit about him. I have found he was not very popular with the soldiers he commanded. At one point, he had been accused by members of the 114th Illinois of drunkenness, so it seems to line up a little bit, but it's really hard to say if it was McMillan for certain. However, the rumor that it was McMillan who assaulted Smith, it was believed by many Union veterans because in later life, McMillan was asked to vacate his office with the New Orleans chapter of the Grand Army of the Republic because of this incident, because of his ties to it. Smith, after the war, I worked for the railroad for a few years, and he actually tried to run for a political office. He definitely was starting to show the effects of the attack that he suffered. Essentially he had some form of mental ailment as a result of this. His brain was not functioning right after how many times he'd been bludgeoned. And by 1875, he was committed to a Nashville asylum, and he spent the rest of his life institutionalized, only coming out for public reunions. Interestingly enough, they said his memory was very foggy on most basic functions. But it came to remembering the Civil War, he had no problem naming soldiers by full names. Privates he only met once. Smith would have the last laugh as he actually outlived McMillan by about 2 decades. Oh, and Swords and Starships, Captain Garrett for $9.99. Merry Christmas, and thank you for the compliment and the hat. This is not the one I've normally worn. This is one I recently picked up. This is the one I got to wear in Gettysburg's Remembrance Day parade last month. The most I know about it, it's a Dirty Billy hat. Dirty Billy is one of the leading hat manufacturers for 18th and 19th century hat wear. It's a little big on me, but I got a pretty good deal, and I've yet to remove the Corps badge. The first Corps was not at Nashville. I'm not trying to spread some sort of misinformation of this hat. I've been too lazy to take the Corps badge off. We were portraying a regiment in the first Corps for the parade. So yeah, this is my new hat. I very much like it. I have my old hat still, but I like this darker. I don't know why that had a light blue color. I don't know why the fabric was like that. Not lurking, just listening to the presentation. That's what lurking is! Fu Man Blue is right. That is what lurking is. But I appreciate... Papyrotenic fan? Papyrotenic... Why am I having a problem pronouncing that? I apologize. Thank you. Welcome to the stream. Thank you for following, and enjoy the rest of this presentation as I continue to lose my marbles. Oh, Michael Coley. Oh, this incident is recreated by drunk girls on pedal bars. Oh, God. We really did go there. It's funny, but in gallows humor way. Oh, okay. PA pyrotechnic fan. Okay, I was like, there's pyrotechnics there, right? I'm reading it somewhere there. Yes, he sent it earlier in the stream. I did highlight it. That did air, right? I highlight as 420. I mean, I can do it 420 again. 420. I do have them buttons. I do have them powers. I don't have an intern. I don't have an unpaid intern like you do, Captain. It's just me running the show. Sometimes the cats run it. Sometimes. It's scary when the cats run my stream. Okay. I gotta wrap. Okay, I gotta wind down the story. So yeah, it was an interesting story. John Banks did an article about, I didn't even have the link saved on this. I wasn't thinking about it. But if you want to read more about this incident that happened, presumably on or near Compton's Hill, essentially this man's life was ruined because of a atrocity committed immediately after the battle. I mean, at this point, he's a prisoner of war. You're not supposed to strike a prisoner of war. So if you want to read about the unfortunate life of Thomas Benton Smith in the aftermath of the Battle of Nashville, this is an article that was created by John Banks. John Banks got a book I really need to read one day. Forget the technical. I think it's called just. Oh yeah, it's right here. Civil War Road Trip of a Lifetime by John Banks. I followed the creation of that book over the years. He would post on Facebook and on his blog. I've yet to buy the book. I feel bad. I really need to read that. It's right up my alley. It's a bunch of oddity stories about Mr. Banks going to these historic sites and just the individuals he would meet along the way and the small stories, the stuff they don't put in the history books. You got to go to these historic sites. You learn about the local lore, the legends, the untold tales. That's the only way you find the juicy details of history, is when you actually go to the place. All right, where were we? Oh yeah, Hood's army completely wrecked. They will escape. But at this point, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. The I guess you want to say the artificial reality that Hood had built for his army, trying to convince them, no, we wanted Franklin. No, look, we're at Nashville. We're almost there. Yeah, that simulation completely collapses on December 16th, 1864, when the Confederate left flank breaks on Compton's Hill. They just did not have the numbers to stop. Once the Union started pouring through, it was a done deal. And you can look at them casualties there. I couldn't really find a good breakdown of I gotta say, a viable breakdown of killed, wounded, or captured, but it speaks for itself. It's 3,000 Union casualties compared to 6,000 Confederate casualties, and take that up into soul. The Confederate casualties, especially at this point in the war, record keeping was very difficult. The immediate aftermath of the Battle of Nashville, of course, it's Union victory. Many historians claim this is the moment that the Confederate Army of Tennessee ceases to be an effective fighting force. Now, there will be a Army of Tennessee in 1865. And if we have the time, we will talk about the battle they take part in North Carolina. But it is not the Army of Tennessee. The Army of Tennessee, which technically began life as the Army of the Mississippi, it is gone. It is gone by this point. John Bell Hood has failed in his gamble to try to capture Nashville. It has cost many Confederate lives. It has destroyed the effectiveness of one of the major Confederate fighting forces. He requests to be relieved of command, which is granted in January of 1865. Union forces, they celebrate. They've won the battle, but the war is still to be fought. And in the following spring of 1865, elements of the forces that fought here at Nashville, particularly Wilson's cavalry, they're going to be sent to Mobile, Alabama, to really take out the last major bastion of Confederate defenses in Alabama. And there will be a couple battles, the Battle of Spanish Fort and the Battle of Fort Blakely in March and April of 1865. And while all of this had happened, Sherman, he had taken Savannah. He is now planning to march through South and North Carolina. So we're all kind of seeing we're in the end game now for the American Civil War. The Battle of Nashville was the end game for the Confederate Army of Tennessee. It's done after this. Again, you'll see a form, but it's kind of like one of them one-off reboots of the franchise. It's like, yeah, it's there. We don't count it. We don't grant you. You may sit on the council, but we don't grant you the rank of master. Stuff like that. Wrangler, no, he was there. Wrangler was at the Battle of Nashville. I did not know this. This was the same army. So the Battle of Atlanta, that was the Confederate Army of Tennessee. That was right when Hood had taken charge in the summer of 1864. We're talking about what happened to them a few months later. So the army that fought at Shiloh, that's going to fight in Chickamauga, Chattanooga, is going to fight through the Atlanta campaign and fights here through the Nashville campaign and the battles of Franklin, Nashville. That's all the same army. That's the Confederate Army of Tennessee. It changed its name a few times, but it's the same entity, if that makes sense. You are an old fart. He declared it. That is a fact. See, he put it there. He claimed it. I didn't say that, so it's not the meaning. He said it. So, this massive battle, it's really the end of the American Civil War for Tennessee. There will be some skirmishing as Hood evacuates Tennessee in the weeks after, but this is the last big battle for the state of Tennessee in the American Civil War that they will have to endure. You like I mentioned, how impactful it is to the course of the war. It takes out a whole army for the Confederacy. This battle does. This is the end of it. You would think it would be well talked about. It would be on the level of a Gettysburg, or on the level, I should say, more of like, the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. I expect many of you guys who are listening to tonight's stream, this is the first time you've really heard in detail about the Battle of Nashville, to realize how big this was. Well, the reason you don't hear about it in the history books, at least not in detail, they always say it in passing, is that, well, when you look at all the chips on the table, the retrospect is Franklin is where the decision was made. Hood's defeat was now inevitable. He was on borrowed time. The deal was Hood could turn back at Franklin and admit defeat, and the American Civil War goes on its merry way, as we know it today, or he keeps going forward in a desperate gamble that just maybe an opportunity will open up. And also so he doesn't have to live with the what if questions in his brain. He can say, look, I tried everything. I tried taking, I got to Nashville. I tried. I couldn't do it. You may ask, why didn't he just attack Nashville? He got there. Why did he wait a few weeks? Well, as we learned, because he couldn't take on the Union defenses. These massive forts, they were forts, proper forts around Nashville. His men were too battered to just make an assault. The best he could hope for was that Thomas would make a hasty mistake trying to, Hood was trying to say, look, we're beaten, we're battered, come attack us. Hopefully he'll miss something when he attacks us and we'll take advantage of it. That didn't happen. Thomas was very calculating as a commander. He was very patient, bought his time, gathered his resources, made the right plans, and was able to decimate Hood's force and take them out of the war. Thomas, for the rest of the war, he'll be involved with reconstructive efforts in Tennessee and Kentucky, and later, after the war's over, in other parts of the former Confederate states as they're being brought back into the Union. Thomas doesn't really get the credit he deserves. You don't really hear his name as much as a Grant or as a Sherman. I think it's partly because Sherman was critical during the war of Thomas. I will say after the war, Sherman, when he writes his memoirs, he's much more kinder to Thomas. He doesn't really get in juicy details about Thomas. He just kind of tells the facts. Like, yeah, every time we needed him, he always came through. He came through Chickamauga, he came through Chattanooga. We always questioned his stuff, but he always came through. And he will be bestowed a new title. After the Battle of Nashville, he is no longer the Rock of Chickamauga. He is now the Sledge of Nashville. This man got some of the best nicknames. He got like pro wrestling nicknames for Civil War generals. It's great. No, there was never, there were whispers of a possibility of a Nashville military park as well as one around Atlanta. The reason those didn't happen, you're dealing with southern cities. You're dealing with Union victories around southern cities. There was no interest by the local population to have those lands preserved because they would mean a Union victory. So that's why when you look at your early national military parks that are formed, your early preservation efforts, look how they're being preserved. Why is Chickamauga one of the first ones to be preserved? Because you'll say, well, it's in the South. That's a southern site. It was a Confederate victory. So they were more than happy to support Chickamauga being preserved. Chattanooga, not preserved well. It's a major city today. It's actually called the Chattanooga Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park. So it's multiple sites. You have the main Chickamauga battlefield, and then you have small sites around the city in Chattanooga. But there's no big battlefield preserved because it was a Union victory in a Confederate state. Manassas is preserved. Why is it preserved? It's a Confederate victory, 2 Confederate victories technically in a Confederate state. Why is Gettysburg preserved? It is a Union victory in a Union state. Why did Antietam get preserved? It is a Union victory in a border state that is very close to Washington, D.C. and northern states that were with the Union. That's how a lot of your battlefield preservation went in the late 19th. I'll say your pre-Great War battlefield preservation. Your first national military parks, look who the victor is and look at the location, and it'll explain exactly why it got preserved. That's why Franklin and Nashville never were preserved as federal property, were never preserved as national battlefields or anything like that. They are Union victories on Confederate soil, and nobody wanted to be reminded of it. Yeah, and a lot of people, I think Nashville, well, first of all, a lot of people don't talk about the Nashville campaign to begin with. This whole campaign is very much overlooked by basic histories, because I think by that point you're in 1864. We have the hindsight saying it's inevitable. Lincoln's been reelected. The supplies are going to start running. The supplies are always running scarce. Confederacy, it's going to get really tight now. There's confidence in the war effort in the Union. So, yeah, it's very easy for us in retrospect to say, well, the war's going to be over by April of 1865. This was all for nothing. They didn't know that. When Hood began his campaign, the presidential election is still going on. Nobody knows what the outcome is going to be yet. And you can argue in a decent amount, I wouldn't say it's the only thing that influenced the election results, but there are some key victories, and not a lot of people know about general histories. The fall of Atlanta is a big one that gets people to support Lincoln. Then you have the Battle of Cedar Creek in the Shenandoah Valley in October of 1864, just a few weeks before the election. Those are big wins, battlefield wins for the Union and political wins for the Lincoln administration that tip the balance in favor for him to win. Is Monocacy worth visiting? Yes. There is, I don't know if Doug Noble, I don't know if you had a chance to see our video. We have a whole episode of Retracing History about the Battle of Monocacy. I was very happy to get down there to see it this year. It's a much smaller scale battle it's a much smaller scale park and small scale battle compared to the likes of Antietam or Gettysburg, but it does a very good job of exploring this forgotten campaign and really gives a better context of what was happening in the first half of 1864. Because in June of 1864, people overlooked the fact, July, was that a July battle? My apologies, that was a July battle. I'm lost. In July of 1864, although Grant has Lee pinned in trenches around Petersburg, a portion of the Army of Northern Virginia, which has been rechristened the Army of the Valley, Jubal Early's force, is able to not only move through the Shenandoah Valley, not only able to get over the Potomac River, they're able to get to the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Nobody talks about this. It's crazy to me. It's the only time we have a president of the United States on a battlefield, actually as the president out there in the middle of a battle. The Battle of Fort Stevens, which happens a day or two later after Monocacy. Monocacy was the key thing that kept the Confederate forces from getting to D.C. on time. They probably would never have broken into the city in hindsight, and they knew it too. It was more of a fear tactic. It was hoping that maybe we'll demoralize the Lincoln administration and make people swing to the McClellan ticket. Maybe, it'll make Lincoln want to negotiate, to do something. We know we can't break it in, but if we can bring fear out of Washington, D.C.'s population and people that were once supporters of Lincoln, that was their real goal in that campaign. And they got very close to achieving it. I would argue they essentially did achieve it, but things then started to go awry elsewhere. The fall of Atlanta swung the political momentum back into the Lincoln administration. And then Lincoln told Sheridan to take out Jubal Early. And that's the same force that fights at the Battle of Monocacy, the same Confederate force. That's who Sheridan is going to defeat in the Battle of Cedar Creek. That's why all that happens. So yeah, Monocacy is much smaller scale battlefield. It was really just it was a day battle, 100 days men and a portion of the 6th Corps buying time for reinforcements to move into Washington, D.C. to deter disaster. But it's an interesting history. They just renovated the visitor center for the 160th anniversary. I was there right before the renovation, so all their artifacts were gone. So I want to make a return trip. So if you have a chance next year, go. All people know is that Rhett Butler fought there. About Atlanta? Yeah. Or Rhett Butler. Rhett Butler. Yeah. All people know is, Atlanta. That was a thing that happened. It's a set of Gone with the Wind. Yeah. I mean, people do remember the Battle of Atlanta, but in a very mythologized way. Although there's a sequence in there. It's a pretty faithful image. It's the pan back that shows you one of the hospitals, shows the Confederate flag and everything. Pretty faithful depiction actually of what the situation was at the end of the siege. Just the carnage that was happening, the toll was taken on the civilian population. But yeah, that's the Battle of Nashville. What do you guys think? Franklin is the decisive battle of the Nashville campaign. But you have to talk about Nashville because it's the big battle. It's the big final. It's much bigger than Franklin itself was. And when you start looking at the numbers, so you must talk about Nashville because this shows so this is why you don't hear about General Hood after 1864. And this is why you don't hear about the original Army of Tennessee operating. It's gone. It's done. Oh, okay. Okay, now I remember. Yes. Yes, and as Sam Watkins put, the blackest 5 hours in the War of the Lost Cause. That's his my paraphrased account of how Sam Watkins described the Battle of Franklin. So yeah, the only time it brought up, it's kind of like it was all in vain. It was a lost cause. It's like, yeah, it was a lost cause, but not in the way you want to idolize it. But I think I hope what I've done with these streams over the year, I'm not just talking about tonight's stream. For the past, when did I start doing these streams about Civil War battles? Was it Shiloh? I think Shiloh was the first one I did where we kind of sat down and we kind of did it like a real, today's the anniversary or last week was the anniversary. Let's talk about its importance. And we try to keep up with the 160ths. We didn't get to do every battle, and there's still more battles to do, but especially this year. We started Chattanooga, we talked about for its 160th anniversary. Then we went into talking about the Overland campaign this spring. We talked about some of the fighting around Atlanta. We talked about the crater. And now we're talking here about, Franklin and Nashville. I had a lot of focus on the Western Theater for the live streams. Of course, we did a lot of field stuff for Gettysburg. We went out in the physical field for stuff like Gettysburg, Monocacy, and Antietam. We done all that. But yeah, these streams in particular, I had a lot of fun doing. I got to talk about the Western Theater a lot this past year, which was really exciting. Got to talk about Chattanooga last year. Got to talk about Kennesaw Mountain. We got to talk about Atlanta, and we got to talk about Franklin and Nashville. So I was very happy we got to talk about all of these engagements. And then the Overland campaign stuff, that was the most intense I'd ever done Uncut history. Because we were there 5 or 6 straight weeks. We did every major Overland campaign battle. Plus, we talked about the Battle of Newmarket. We just kept going. That was fun to do. And it really, I hope what I've done with these streams is really get in more detail, expose our audience here about more details about these battles, so they're not just dates and numbers, to really get a feel for how every day was a struggle in the American Civil War. We see it today in retrospect that, it's inevitable. It's so easy for people today to look at the Battle of Gettysburg and go, and that was the turning point, and the Union was ultimately going to win. They didn't know that. Every day was a life and death struggle for all of these soldiers and for civilians as well, for the people of the United States. They did not know when this horror was going to finally end. So it's fun. It's I shouldn't say fun. It's informative to go through in kind of a real-time sense, talking on the 160th anniversaries when these events actually occur, and see how everything was hanging in the balance. Every day things were hanging in the balance. Things could have come out a little bit differently or a lot differently. Franklin could have been partially preserved until at least 20 years ago. Now just a small area around the Carter House. I'd advise you to go back and watch our Franklin stream if you have not. Franklin is on the comeback. It's actually in the past 20 years, a lot of great gains have been made in reclaiming where the battle occurred and preserving it. I think they just reclaimed a building that's in front of the Carter House, and that's going to eventually get leveled, and that'll be more battlefield. And the community of Franklin, the American Battlefield Trust, of course, the Battle of Franklin Trust, all these forces coming together in Franklin, Tennessee, are doing the Lord's work and doing what I think everybody thought was impossible. And I always tell people, I've told people about when it comes to historical preservation. Ideally, we want to preserve the historic place from the moment the event happened to the present day. 99% of the time, that's not what happens. Usually an event happens, nobody knows it was a historical event till about a half century later. And by that point, we're lucky if the thing is still there. In most cases, it's probably been destroyed total. We have no chance. Don't lose faith. You can, if you have the right resources, you can bring the history back to life, or in the very least, you can bring it back in a believable sense that this would not be out of place for the historical event, and start to use that as a way, as a living, breathing classroom for historical education. So historical reclamation, it's a thing in historical preservation. It can be done. All right, guys. Well, we're an hour, 20 minutes in, so I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. But before we do take off, I want to do a couple things. First things first, I want to pop over very briefly. I want to show you something here. So we're talking about, these battles, these events that are overlooked because it makes telling a simple historical narrative very difficult. So a lot of stuff gets lost. A lot of stuff's put on the cutting room floor, as it would be said in making movies. And the Battle of Nashville, there is no Nashville battlefield today. You can't go today. The city is completely enveloped where the battle occurred. That doesn't mean there are not people trying to preserve it. This is the website. Is it? The website is uploaded. Okay, very good. The website is uploading. I thought it wasn't. This is the website for the Battle of Nashville Trust. And you can see this past weekend was the 160th anniversary commemoration events for this battle. And I was surprised to see how many places they do have preserved. So this is this is an entity based out of Nashville. Their objective is preserving parts of where the battle occurred and interpreting the events of the battle. Here's a list of all the sites that are preserved from the Battle of Nashville. So while there's no battlefield, there are sites that interpret the battle. Shies Hill is probably the most prominent that is preserved. It is still a portion of the hilltop is preserved. They got artillery pieces up there. There's a lot of monuments actually on Shies Hill. So you can go over here to the Battle of Franklin Trust and read about the sites they are trying to preserve. Here's an detailed map showing you. There, look, there's McMillan's Brigade. Oh, no. And there's Smith. Oh, no. We know what's about to happen there. But there you can see in more detail the fighting that was happening on Compton's Hill, later to be renamed Shies Hill. Great detail about the battle. And then it goes down here a little farther, talks about some of the memorial dedications. Actually, they just dedicated a monument to the 114th Illinois last year on Shies Hill. So right now, monumentation is happening in Nashville. More and more people are becoming aware of this battle and hoping if they can't preserve the physical land, they can at least put something that'll allow people to remember what happened on the land that they're standing upon. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the link in the chat so all you guys tonight can go over and explore the great work of the Battle of Nashville Trust. You should go over see the Battle of Franklin Trust. Oh, I forgot to show you something too. After I did my stream, I did a little shopping. Yeah, I did a little shopping, and I got myself after Turkey Day, I got myself a Battle Franklin Trust shirt for the Carter House in honor of the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Franklin. So these were just, according to the website, this is a limited run shirt. I don't know if they're still available now. They made them for the 160th commemorations. Of course, I wasn't able to go, being in Pennsylvania, not Tennessee. I do hope one day, especially get to Franklin. Nashville's a city, and I don't do cities too well. But I'm hoping one day we're going to get to go to Franklin and we can do a retrace in history. So before you guys head out, if you have not done so already, be sure to hit the like button down below, because when you hit the like button, you let the tube you gods and goddesses, or the tube you Nimrods, you let them know that, hey, we want to use social media not just for brain rot, we want to use it to get some edumerication on. So be sure to hit the like button. It helps the channel grow. And if you want to follow us in our future adventures, consider subscribing right here to Readout Productions. And then we try to upload once a week. Right now, being in the holiday, it's been a little bit difficult. Gonna tell you what we're gonna do the rest of the year. I have 2 things planned. Maybe something else will happen. There will be one more retrace in history for the year, and it is on Valley Forge. I've been working on this thing since March. I'm not happy with it. I am embarrassed by this final product, but I have been tinkering with it and delaying it and procrastinating and moaning about it. I'm putting it together. It'll be a Christmas special. I don't know if it'll actually come out on Christmas, but it'll come out around the time. So one more retracing history. It's about Valley Forge. That'll complete our Philadelphia campaign trilogy of videos on that campaign for retracing history. So expect that to come out. We will be doing a stream next week. I'm debating if we should do it Tuesday or Thursday. Probably, as much as I want to do a Christmas Eve, I think I may wait till Thursday because people may be more available. Next week, there will be a live stream. It is viewer's choice. We did this last year where basically I told everybody, hey, I really don't got a script for the last stream of the year. What would you like me to talk about? And to the best of my abilities, I will talk about it. Whatever comes into your mind. You want me to talk about a historical event? Do you want me to talk about a movie or a book or a show or something that has your interest? Doesn't even have to be history related. If there's just something you want me to talk about, let me know. I will post an official thread that you can send suggestions on what you would like me to talk about for the viewer's choice stream. So keep an eye out on the community tab on the YouTube channel. You'll know when the thread pops up. You'll know when it is. And then if you want to drop your suggestion, please do so. I'll probably do the same thing. I'll make a thread on Twitter. Well, X, formerly known as Twitter, which I just simply call Elon's place. I'll post a thread up there in the coming days so you can send submissions on what you would like me to talk about on Viewer's Choice Night for Uncut History. Oh, the horrors. Oh, the horrors that may ensue. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time here on Uncut History.
$10, a lot of money.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
Oh, and for those that thought I forgot the poll, I have ended the poll. The question was, at what point did Hood lose this campaign? 42% of you said Battle of Franklin was the moment. 28% said it was over before it began. And then there was 14% both for Spring Hill and Nashville itself. Good night, everybody.